I was like, they're so lucky they get to have boyfriends and they can spend time to like all of this stuff. And then as I got older and saw the hot mess and the depression, the anxiety, the alcoholism, the
Yeah.
even prescription drugs nowadays being given like to so many people, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, if they're so lucky, why are they so unhappy? I tell women to respect their bodies, to respect themselves. The more a man a woman sleeps with, the less she's able to pair bond. And pair bonding is the ultimate test of emotional and physical health.
Hey, what's up, guys? I have a great guest for you today. Her name is Mina Irfan. She's a spirituality coach. She teaches women how to use their femininity to get the things that they want out of life and how to attract the perfect male. Mina, can you give yourself a short introduction?
Sure. So I would consider myself a spiritual mentor, a teacher, but biggest thing of all, I'm a student of life. I have been through a lot of things myself that have forced me to go inwards and do a lot of inner work. And over time, having had results in life, I started sharing that information and I realized, oh my God, other people needed this stuff as well. So now I have this online YouTube channel, couple of books, over 60 courses, and I help women reconnect with themselves and find their own true voice and kind of, I would say also like unplug from the collective unconscious and the hot mess that is going on in the dating culture right now and the relationship culture. So
Yeah.
that's what I do in a nutshell.
Okay. So, what is your background? Where are you from? What's your ethnicity?
Sure. So my parents were actually from Pakistan and they're both deceased now, but they were Pakistani immigrants in the United States. So I was born and raised here, but
Okay.
had a lot of like going back and forth between the cultures, thank God, because growing up, I preferred my American culture a lot more, and it led me down a lot of mistakes and heartaches and a lot of suffering. And it wasn't until I reconnected with my Eastern culture, my Eastern values and then studying like evolution, anthropology, psychology, I'm like, oh my God, like everything my culture says, it's true to how Homo sapiens have evolved. Like
Yeah.
that's how we're supposed to live. So I have this unique perspective from both cultures, and I try to bring that into my work.
Ironically, I'm actually seeing a Pakistani woman and she's from Pakistan. So I'm just curious, like, what differences in relationships do you see between Pakistan and America? Like, what stands out to you?
The biggest thing that stands out to me is that the Pakistani culture, it's a modern culture, but it's very traditional. So basically, they haven't conditioned out of like interdependence and human connection and prioritizing family and relationships and children. And they're very modern, but at the same time, like their values are very much rooted in God and faith and surrender and like marriage is everything. Pakistani is mostly Islamic. It's an Islamic nation, and in Pakistani culture and in Islam, it's believed that marriage is half your religion. So I mean, marriage is like this very sacred thing, and we do not take it lightly. It's like it's very near and dear. It's like it's everything. So I would say that if you're dating a Pakistani woman, you know, she's gonna be all in. Like, unless she's super westernized and she's
Yeah.
prioritizing the Western culture, she's gonna have the right values.
Okay. The woman that I'm seeing is actually not westernized at all. So it's different for me, but I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time. And she's very respectful. I want to know, you said you help women find themselves. What do you mean by that?
I feel like the biggest thing for this is like knowing what you really want and what you truly desire versus what society's been telling you is important and what you should want and what you should prioritize, right? Like, for example, I work with a lot of women that are, hyper successful, high achieving. They were the good girls. They did all the things society told them to do. Get your degrees, get your high paying job or your career, prioritize making money and getting all of these outward, very masculine achievements, and they did that, and yet they feel unhappy, burnt out, unfulfilled. And then when they finally do go looking out later in life, they realize that men don't really care about their degrees. Men don't really care about all the things that they worked really hard for. In fact, they may have lowered their mate value in some regards because now they're looking at people that could have been really great mates for them, but they're looking down on them because maybe they're not as successful as they are. So when I can't tell you how many women have come in my container in my work and they were like, I don't want to be a mother. I definitely don't want to have kids. And now they're having babies. Because when they went inward and really unplugged from what they were told motherhood was supposed to be like and started reconnecting, they're like, no, I do want kids. I do want to be in a happy, robust, relationship. So finding yourself is really making sure that what you're choosing is what you want. I think feminism lied to women and convinced them that we all just wanted this like overachievement in our life and that everything else was oppression. And that's not what we're wired to want. Like our truest desire is our connection, our family, children, being surrounded by people we love. And so taking back to what they really want in their heart.
So what I'm getting from you is that the Western culture is basically stripping women of their femininity and convincing them that they will get fulfillment through a job, through striving and competing against men and the corporate world. Um, to you, what do you believe true femininity is and what it looks like?
I think at women, female, feminine energy, all of these things are connected, and we have evolved to scientifically and also spiritually evolved to prioritize human connection and relationships. Like family is really important to us. And I know this firsthand because family was always very important to me. And yet, growing up in the United States and wanting nothing to do with my own, I was embarrassed of my culture growing up. I just wanted, my parents embarrassed me, like my lifestyle embarrassed me. I would go back home, to my parents' country. We would go every year. And I would see how much just love there was. And it just felt just I couldn't describe it as a child, but now I know. I call like everyone's hearts were open and they were just welcoming. And some of my real relatives had no money. Like they lived in huts. My dad's side of the family was very wealthy, and my mom's side of the family was not so wealthy. And some of my relatives were really poor. Like they didn't have a lot, but they had open hearts and they had so much love. And there was just this feeling of belonging. And then I would come home here, and like my parents were out working all day long, and like we were home alone for days at a time. We would not see anyone for days, not talk to anyone. And it was just such a big difference. Like I never saw any of my relatives' homes locked back home. People would just, their neighbors would walk in and just spend hours talking. My grandmother's neighbors would come and take me. Oh, Mina's here. She's visiting. They would take me, feed me, shower me, tutor me, play with me, and like send me home. You can't do that kind of stuff here, right? But then when I would come here, I would also receive messages of how like everyone's oppressed over there and how that's a third world country and like it's
Yeah.
unsafe. But like we would lock our doors here, but we would never lock our doors there. Like your neighbors and your extended family was your safety. Everyone was looking out for you. So I grew up in this like really weird kind of dilemma. I wanted nothing more than to be American. I wanted the Pakistani hyphen to be erased. Like I'm just an American, right?
Mhm.
But I felt so loved and like something was missing when I would come back over here. So I did the American thing. I was married in my early 20s. I did it the American way, not the Pakistani way where your family is involved in the decision and they vet the guy and there's a whole process. And that marriage ended horribly. It was horrible. I was going through a divorce while I was pregnant with my first. I mean, it was I did it the
Yeah.
American way and it failed. And those 4 years afterwards that I was single, single mom, going to school, having my business, watching all my friends who were American also failing, and then watching all of my Pakistani relatives and my Pakistani friends thriving in relationships, but they were supposed to be the ones that were oppressed.
Yeah.
So it was like this whole awakening process. The second time around, I did it the right way. I did it everything the Pakistani way, and I am in a beautiful, robust, like secure relation marriage of three beautiful kids. And now I blend the two cultures. There's definitely things in the Western culture that I really love that we don't have in the Eastern culture. So I feel like I have a buffet that I get to choose from to make my perfect plate.
I hear you. I'm wondering, what I want to know is your first husband, was he Pakistani?
He was.
Okay. And was he Americanized Pakistani?
He was not, but he was seeing me for what I was, and it was a green card. What's in, I don't know if you're familiar with this. I think this happens a lot in other cultures too, but one of the things that can happen in my culture is that people that need green cards, they target women that are more Americanized or just American women because I don't know what their belief system is that they're less than, that they're I don't know, they almost don't even treat you like human. It's like you're someone that you just use, you get your green card, you get your resources, whatever you can grab, and then you dump. And then he went back home, married someone super Pakistani, and like so I
Wow.
think it was never I think and this has happened to a lot of other people that I know, in other cultures too, but especially in the Pakistani and Indian community. I think that when you're super westernized and when you're a strong independent woman, you're actually a big target for fraud.
Okay. And why do you say that? Is it because you don't have as many people having your back? Like, why does that
Many
happen?
re I think what I've learned over the years is that feminine power, it's very hidden. It's very strong on the inside, but soft on the outside. It's very warm, right? You have
Yeah.
this containment of protection from your father, your brothers, your uncles, like your whole community, your tribe. But when you claim and classify yourself as an independent woman, you start wearing that strongness outside, which is actually a sign that you're weak inside. Because why would you need to showcase that I'm strong and independent if you were that, right? People can see that as a cope, they can see that as a mask, and I've just come to learn that that actually makes you a target because I work with high achieving successful. I'm talking about researchers, scientists, CEOs, like the most successful top 1% women of all cultures. And the one thing that they have across cultures is that they're in positions of power, they have money, and because they are independent, they don't value their dad's, input. They don't have men, vetting for them. And so they get themselves in situation where some like predators look for these kind of women because you have money, you have power, and you're independent, so you're not going to mess around too much with your dad and your mom or your brother and all the men in your family vetting for you.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you're actually pretty weak when you're strong and independent.
That's a great point. You're isolated
Yep.
when you're like that. Okay.
And you made that decision,
Yeah.
right? Like a lot of times you have your dad or you have your brother, but you don't value their opinion. Because I had all of those resources available. Like my culture does it that way. And the second time around, like my husband had to provide my dad 3 years of tax returns, house papers, his passport, his bank
Oh,
statements, his like, who his parents were, uncles, aunts, like the way it's traditionally done. That wasn't extraordinary in my culture. That's just the way it is. Like that's just how it's done. There's an entire vetting process. And actually, this is my culture didn't invent that. We never evolved out of it. If you go back to hunter-gatherer days, how did we choose mates? It was people from our tribe that we knew. It might be, the guy from the tribe next door that we exchange resources with. When we don't have enough meat, maybe we trade with them and we choose the best hunter from. So we used to marry into people that we knew for a long time and that we had relationships with our people knew their people, right? This is
yeah.
the first time that we're just randomly choosing people and then we're like basing it off of chemistry and love and all of these fleeting emotions and not checking people for values and not checking people for our evolutionary needs and what we were supposed to provide for each other. And then we're just, praying that it works.
It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, And I was telling him that, yeah, we don't have arranged marriages anymore, but women are still getting uh dating whoever their friends tell them to date. And their friends don't have that much dating experience, relationship experience at all, but their parents do. So if they're gonna listen to their friends, they're way better off listening to their parents, the ones that have life experience and they can actually help you make a better decision. I want to know, how does the vetting process look like in Pakistan when a woman, yeah, what's the vetting process like for both men and women? How does a man get vetted versus how does a woman get vetted in Pakistan?
So again, I'm gonna go back to it's the way that Homo sapiens have always done it. So we never it so I just want to clarify that Pakistani people didn't crack the code on something new. They just never evolved out of how we've done it. So Pakistani culture is kind of the hybrid between Middle Eastern culture and Indian culture. So we're like the happy medium. We're not very traditional, like as traditional as some of the Middle Eastern cultures, and we're not as modern as the Indian culture is. So we're kind of like safely in the middle. And the way it's done is, first of all, we understand that men and women are different. So we never evolved. We're not modern enough to think that men and women are different. Like we understand that God created them differently. Like if we were to get a blood work panel done for you and me, like if the doctor we switched them and we didn't tell them they would know that you are a man and I'm a woman, right? Just
Yeah.
from our blood work or scanning our brains, like they would know. So we believe that men and women are different and they bring different strengths to the game and they have different weaknesses as well, and that together they actually create a whole. So, in my culture, what we believe is that male nature recognizes male nature a lot more than women. Women are more emotional. We project our like the way we think onto men and think that's how they think. But men don't think like women think. They're
Mhm.
wired differently. So in the wedding process, the men are very much involved. As if you go back to all of the ancient cultures that we have data on that have been extensively studied by anthropologists, men were very much involved in choosing partners. Like it was like women might have been involved in more of the arrangements part, the fun part, but like the decision making was left to men, and there's a good reason for that because men recognize predatory behavior. They also recognize potential. They can see things that women cannot see because they're different. So
Yeah.
the way men are vetted, so let's say, let me give you examples from just my cousins, a lot of my cousins' weddings, right? So let's say that a proposal, so a woman when she's of age, and typically this will be right when she's graduating from college, she'll start getting proposals. And so you might get like 4 or 5 proposals from different men at the same time. And a proposal means that a man showed up to your house with his parents and his uncles and his cousins and like as many family members that he could fit in your living room. Like that's usually the constraint because we come from
Mhm.
large families. So he'll bring his family, and then the woman's family is there, and they will meet and they'll talk, and the guy and the girl they will see each other in front of everyone, and if there's permission from both sides, they might be allowed to go on like a lunch date. But
Mhm.
sometimes it depends on how conservative. Sometimes the cousins might go with, or the married brother and his wife might go with. So it's kind of like that. So then the dad will say, okay, well, thank you for the proposal, and we'll need a week. And then the guy's family, like, will like the girl's uncle might happen to be in the neighborhood of the guy's job, and he might just stop by. And he might stop by and see you interacting with your colleagues.
Yeah.
And he, your so and so's cousin might say, "Oh, I know his dad." Okay, well, he might go and hang out with his dad for an afternoon. And the women in the family might go stand and spend an afternoon with the other daughters-in-law to see how they're being treated. Are they dressed well? And what's the culture of their home? Do they cook? Do they have house help? How are the women of the house treated?
Mhm.
Are they liberal? Are the women allowed to work outside the house? Or so there's all of these things that the women look for, and then some things that the men, and then at the end, the family will, voice their opinions, and then the girl will say, well, I really like that one. And then the dad might say, well, that one was nice, but we did notice this thing at his work. So are you okay with that? And the mom might say, well, we went to their house. We did notice that they don't have as much help as we have. Are you sure you're willing to like cook and you're going to be okay with that lifestyle? And she might say, I really liked him. I'm going to be okay with that. So that's how it's a process, but usually it's within when you're of age, within 2 weeks, like it's done. Like that's the process. Like
Yeah.
because there isn't, you didn't meet the guy on Tinder. So like you don't have to get to know him for 2000 years and he doesn't have to test drive you in all different seasons of life and do all, because it's like the
Yeah.
whole family was involved on it, the process.
That makes sense. The one thing that stood out that you said was that men know how to vet men, and it's the truth. Like men know when a guy is full of shit or if he has like dark traits. If he's like hiding something. And I can tell just based off of Western society, a lot of how we vet people is all about looks. It's all about
Hmm.
your dress, how you are you in shape, how do you speak? Do you speak proper? And that just opens up the door for manipulation compared to Pakistan, like how do the women here, how would you say the women in the West are incorrectly dating man and betting man?
So the number one I teach my students and clients is you have to involve men. I don't care if your dad's not there, involve a pastor, involve it should be an elderly man. And I'm not gonna say like like when I say elderly, I don't mean like 85. I mean it should be a man with experience. At least I would say at least 40 and up, because typically by the time a man is in his 40s, he's seen some things, he's experienced some things
Mhm.
and he has worldly experience and he's not going to be vetting the guy on how much swag he has or what his car is like like my 19-year-old, mom, he drives a cool car. He's not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
He's going to be looking at deeply valuable skill sets that actually are helpful in a long-term union and marriage. So my dad used to say that that when in our culture when we buy a horse we look at 7 generations back. So, that will give you the most like detailed look at someone's history. Because chances are that if his dad was, a provider, a protector, a man of integrity, and so was his dad, and so was his dad, like that's in their bloodline. That's how they've been conditioned. He's got a family reputation for, and then the other thing that is so cool is that your family supports you through that marriage. So, for example, I would never do this, but just giving you an example, like if I had a thing with my husband, like let's say we got into an argument. My parents aren't alive, but when they were, if I called them and if I said, "Oh my God, you can't believe what, Irfan said," they're not going to be egging me on. They're not like a lot of people here, a lot of my clients will call their friends and their friends will be, "Oh, he's such a loser. I never liked him for you. You're so much better than him." Your family doesn't do that. They know you, they know human relationships
Yeah.
and they understand like these dynamics and they might say, well, what did you say and how did you handle this? And
Yeah.
this happens sometimes in relationships, like this is something you're going to have to learn to communicate. Like there's accountability from both sides. And this is very controversial. People always get mad at when I say this, but I'm sorry. Shame is a very important component of society that we've had for millions of years. And people get mad at me when I say this, but we have shaming. Public shaming is like a real thing that's
Mhm.
still very much used. So let's say that, a woman's husband isn't doing right by her. Like, let's say that he isn't paying the bills, he's not taking care of her, and that's making her stressed, and she can't really be there for the kids. Okay, he's going to not only be shamed by her family, his own family will be shaming him and saying, "Oh my God, like what no one's going to want to marry your sister now. Like now we're going to be the family that is known for, not being upstanding husbands and now no one's going to want like there is such an element of accountability in my culture that you think a million times before you make decisions. And I think that that's an appropriate way to be. For example, I was shamed for getting divorced, and I believe that was a rightful thing because I should have been shamed. I chose poorly. I didn't listen to my parents. right? I didn't involve my brother and my dad on the decision. In fact, I went against their decision. And if I wasn't publicly shamed for that, my sisters, my cousins, everyone else would think, well, this is just the way that we live now. This is what we do. I would have allowed a lot of other people's relationships to be ruined. But me being shamed through that process helped me realize the value of choosing correctly, of sticking with your family, and how making bad decisions has consequences for your family too.
No, it makes sense. It's funny. I told a friend of mine, he's not Pakistani, he's actually Indian. And I was telling him because he's seeing a woman and they haven't had a fight yet. And I said, man, whatever you do, when you guys do have that bad moment, make sure the people that you go to fight for her. And hopefully the people she goes to fight for you because you need a unit that's going to keep you together. You don't want your friends trying to making things worse and then convincing you that your way of thinking is right. And then, ruining your relationship, which a lot of people do end up doing. I want to know a little bit more about your sisterhood. I saw on YouTube that you have this like sisterhood program or something like that where women meet you at, various different places. Like what goes on at those events?
Oh yes, my in-person intensive. So, um, basically what I teach in my digital courses, it's similar to that, but there's just something about holding that space for women in person. So one of the things that I've realized is that collectively, especially in the West, we have this huge sisterhood wound. And some of it is generational, some of it is just comes from the mother line of our moms, because if you really think about it, last couple of generations is when women went out into the workforce and that essential 3-year period that the baby really attunes to the mother's needs and starts seeing her or his place in the world, that system was broken. And because of that broken system, there was this lack of mamta activation. And mamta in the Indian and Pakistani culture is the word for your natural God-given motherly instincts. So every little girl and a boys too in their own regard, but mostly women, like girls, are born this with this mamta energy, this natural energy. And you notice little girls playing with their dolls and feeding them. One part is there, and the other part of this is activated through your mom relating with you in a certain way, and then your sisters and your cousins and your aunts and your grandma. This like maternal love that is provided for you when in the early formative years. And because a lot of us didn't get that, I mean, I know I wasn't able to get that because my parents were the first ones here from both sides, so most relatives were back home, and then my mom was working. So I never got that mamta activation, and it creates this distrust with other women where you feel like you want to so badly have female friendships and connect with them on a deep level, but there's also this feeling of, can I really trust her? And, is she jealous of me? And so what we do is when we come together, we try to bring that mamta energy to each other in a safe place so we can start restoring that feminine bonding where we're looking out for each other, where we're giving each other kind advice. And I used to get a lot of hate for this, but people understand now, at least my community, that if you come to me complaining about your husband, I'm gonna say, I want more details. Give me the entire situation, right? Like, because like if you're triggered right now and you're telling me this thing and I add fuel to the fire, I'm just ruining your relationship. I'm adding spark to it. Next day, you're gonna make up with your man, but like I didn't get that opportunity, so now I'm sitting here hating your man when he's a good, kind person and you guys just had a moment, right? So we create this safety and trust among women so we can start restoring this mamta energy in each other.
I want to know a little bit more about relationships. So on your YouTube channel, you mentioned how women choose crappy, basically loser men. You know, these high achieving women that you work with, like how do they end up with losers in the first place?
Because they're basing it on chemistry and looks. I think that human beings have always had really strong guidance. That's where religion came from. And I think some people really like there's two types of people in my eyes. Like there was the type of people that are like, even when I share like dieting advice, for example, right? There's some people there, I'll just mention a few things and then they'll go and study it and they'll customize it. And then there's people they're like, tell me exactly what to eat, when to eat it, in how much quantity. Like, they want the entire plate and like their time set up. And that there's a lot more people like that. And so religion and then like tribal knowledge that was passed down generation to generation provided this guidance, right? Women didn't have to work too hard to choose a mate, right? Like you were born, and then by the time you were like, a teenager, your parents probably had their eyes on like a couple of people from your tribe. You didn't have 800 options on websites. Like there were a couple people that were like in your age group, and like they chose someone, and then you were married, and then you were given a certain guidance. This is his role, this is your role, this is what we do. It was easy. There was not that much decision fatigue. Well, now we don't have any guidance. We don't trust our parents to choose from us,
Mhm.
right? We can't trust our hot mess friends. And so the only guidance is choose a high value man. Well, what does that mean? What the hell does that mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
really.
He has to have a Mercedes and a gold watch and dress nice. Well, the truth is that most men who are working really hard, who are providers, who are, trying to get their degrees and save up money, don't know how to dress well. They don't know how to take sexy selfies of themselves and make the best profile,
Yeah.
right? They're gonna be the ones that Tinder doesn't even promote. They're the ones
Mhm.
buried, right? My mom used to say that boyfriends will always be more exciting than husbands. Husbands are so boring because they're worried about your health. They're worried about your 401k. They're worried about paying all your bills, and they're pretty annoying because they're trying to keep you safe all the time. A
Yeah.
boyfriend will come along, sleep with you, have fun with you, and leave. He's fun. He's so exciting. Well, that's what women are choosing partners on, the fun and the excitement. And how is he dressed? Because who wants to save guy that's trying to balance your checkbook?
I hear you. I mean, I know that that's true. A lot of women are vetting guys based off of sexuality, sex. How hot is he? What do their friends think? What do you think women in the West should be? How should they be vetting their man? Like, what traits should they look for?
So let me just go strictly scientific, because sometimes I get lashed back. People say, "Oh, well, isn't Pakistani culture this? Isn't Pakistani?" And they're like, "Oh, or that's your culture, right?" The thing is that I try to take the best of
Mhm.
every culture, right? There's things that
Yeah,
I've learned from the Japanese culture when I was studying the blue zones, right? Like I'm like, "Oh, that's what they do to live to 100. Let's do that." Pakistani culture and Indian culture, they have a lot of hot messes, like every culture in their culture. The
yeah,
one thing that Pakistani culture gets really great, like our divorce rate is 4%. It's like over 50% in the United States. The one thing that I would say Pakistani culture excels at is relationships. They're so good at it. And if you study it, it's because they never evolved out of our evolutionary history, like I said. So now science, which is only 500 years old, is catching up and they're doing these studies. And what they're realizing is some of the things that were considered like outdated values and outdated like ways of being are actually scientifically sound ways to see if a marriage will succeed. So the two main things I would say is number one is they say growth mindset. So what they found is that people who have beliefs that people are generally fixed, like you are how you cannot be changed, and our marriage is doomed because you can't be changed. Like that's just how you are, or that's just how I am. Fixed mindset people have difficulty in relationships because they tend to think that they don't see their marriage as a living, breathing document that's ever evolving because they can't see themselves that way. So that would be number one. Secondly, it would be shared values. So you have to have some kind of a commandment system or something that you agree with, whether it's religion, it could be gender roles, it could be something. Now, when I say values, a lot of people don't even know what that is and they think hobbies. Like, no, it's not about hobbies. So, for example,
mhm,
my husband and I both agree that the man is the leader of the household, that he is the provider and protector. Whether that's right or wrong is
yeah.
completely irrelevant because we both agree that it's true. We both agree that moms need to stay home with the children and raise them themselves. Whether that's wrong or right, The fact is that we both agree to that. Now, both of those things are scientifically also sound because that's how we've evolved. But we have the foundation so right that it, like my husband loves cricket. I don't know if you're familiar, but the rest of the
Mm,
world, yeah, it's like so obsessed with cricket, right? I you can't put a gun to my head and make me watch cricket, right? We don't have a lot of hobbies in common. It doesn't matter. He does that with his friends. So hobbies don't matter as much in the long run, but values are everything. And because we don't have religion in the West as much anymore, we don't have gender roles. We're also getting rid of gender, which is super weird and super scary. So then what are we supposed to base it on? Like who
mm.
tells us, who informs us what should I be looking for? Well, if I don't know, then I'm just gonna choose the hottie on Tinder.
Makes sense. You talk a lot about women changing, I guess women saving themselves for marriage. Like how does a woman in the West do that? Because we have sex everywhere. Women are being encouraged to have multiple sexual partners. And if you were to, go against that message, basically you're being a part of the patriarchy, or you hate women. So how do you get a woman from the West to want to date somebody, to vet somebody, and to save herself for marriage?
So I've done this with hundreds of thousands of women. So interestingly enough, I think women innately know this. I thought I was gonna look like I have two heads if I showed up on YouTube telling women save yourself for marriage, right? And I'm not coming at you from a very religious dogma kind of place. Like I'm talking about it from a scientific perspective. I've actually had really huge religious organizations contact me saying we love what you're doing because people have lost religion and so they've lost the important things that religion was teaching, and you teach it in a way that's not like sinful or like shaming people in that way so they can understand it. So I thought that was like I thought I was losing my mind because I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that they actually appreciate that." So the only women telling women to sleep around, the only people telling women to sleep around are predatory men, which is a very, very small subset of the human population. It's
Mhm.
very loud, especially right now, and they get a lot of attention. So it seems like that's most men, but it's not. It's very easy to think it's most men if that's what you're involved in and playing with, because then you start informing your beliefs around that. But, I would say it's like 1% maybe, probably less of so predatory men, right? Like we know that the whole sexual revolution was one of the biggest like men supporters of that was Hugh Hefner. Why would Hugh Hefner be interested in my sexuality?
Mhm.
What it like, who are you, right? Like, why are you so interested in my birth control and my sexual rights unless you're gaining something from that? Because men don't want women to sleep around. Men actually look down upon women that's like they don't want that for their friends, they don't want it for their sisters, they don't want it for their mother, they don't want it for their daughters, they don't want it for women. They wouldn't want it for any woman. Like healthy men do not want women to sleep around. Okay? Then who else is informing you? Women who are doing that because they've done it, they've made that mistake, and they're so invested in it, and misery loves company. And because they've done it, and I always say to my clients and students, look at their life. Zoom out a little bit because that's what happened to me. I idealized American culture growing up. I was like, they're so lucky they get to have boyfriends and they can spend time to like all of this stuff. And then as I got older and saw the hot mess and the depression, the anxiety, the alcoholism, the
Yeah.
even prescription drugs nowadays being given like to so many people, right? So I'm like, wait a minute, if they're so lucky, why are they so unhappy? And if Eastern women are so oppressed, why are they so happy and provided for? And like I saw my aunts and my cousins live, in their home with their kids, have help, have someone cooking for them, cleaning for them, receiving shopping money, like, and these weren't wealthy people. This was just like average people. And so, but these women are supposed to be oppressed. So I I tell women to respect their bodies, to respect themselves. Like we know from a just DNA perspective that the more man a woman sleeps with, the less she's able to pair bond. And pair bonding is the ultimate test of emotional and physical health. So if you wanted to know if someone is healthy in every sense of the word from a scientific perspective, do they still retain their God-given evolved scientific ability to pair bond with other people? And if they do not, something has broken that because they came into the world with that ability. Something happened in their life where that chain was broken. Okay, so like in a zoo, if an ape or a tiger, some species stops behaving out of its nature, they will call in experts and they will have that expert study it and see what was disrupted in its environment that is now behaving out of its nature. Women sleeping with multiple partners, not being able to pair bond, suddenly not wanting to be married, not being able to keep a marriage, not wanting to have kids, is Homo sapiens behaving out
Mhm.
of nature. It's never happened before. So something is disrupted. So if we call in experts, if we call in people and give them authority to speak the truth, by the way, in the anthropology, evolutionary psychology community, there is a lot of fear about speaking up about this. I don't give a damn, so I just say it. But there's people that have been canceled for saying things. There's so many people that are learning stuff scientifically with data
Yeah.
and they talk about it amongst each other and they are terrified of bringing this because of the repercussions. It basically coming to people and saying, ha ha ha, sorry, you know how we said about the sexual revolution and all of this? Yes, sorry, we like screwed you up really badly. And like, this is going to keep impacting future generations. So we are now behaving out of human nature. We need help.
They don't talk about this a lot. They always say a man that can get a bunch of women, he's praised. This is a high status male. But honestly, men sleeping around like that, it affects them negatively as well. Like it affects them spiritually. It messes up their head when it comes to actually having that monogamous relationship. One thing too you mentioned was a high value man. I mean, the narrative is it's crazy how easy it is to manipulate people, but the narrative on the internet is that a high value man is a man that has fancy cars, can sleep with a lot of women, he's over 6 feet tall, he's jacked, but it has nothing to do with that person's character. Nothing. And I'm just like, your value comes from who you are, not from what you own. um One thing that you do mention on your videos that cracked me up, you said that what did you say? You said know a man's check out a man's assets, but don't show him yours. Like, what's that all about? I mean, I thought in the marriage you're both combining your assets.
So sometimes you have to speak the language and say things in a certain way to attract people that need your help the most, right? And I wasn't good at that before, but I have a new social media manager, so I'm getting a little bit better at it. So however, I also do believe that. I would never say something I didn't believe. So a man and a woman brings different assets to a relationship, right? A man that's been raised to be a provider and a protector. I have two sons and a daughter, so I know this firsthand. They start very young. Like my son, when he was my oldest one, who's now 19, when he was 9, he started mulling over what he was going to study so that he can provide for his family in the future. When he was going to university, it was a whole thing. He interviewed every cousin of his that had gone to college, and was check online, like checking salaries for those, and am I gonna be able to buy a house with this? And if I do this, then at this age I can get married, and then my wife can have kids by this age. So they're trained to be providers since birth. Like it's a they're born with that in their DNA, and then it's activated by other men in the community. Men raise men, women don't. Like single household, we know single mother households have a lot of problems because we need men to raise men. So um, that's why I'm trying to retrain these women to not look for these faux signs of wealth, nice car, a fancy wardrobe. They're looking for these things that anyone can finance on a credit card, right? Like a
Yeah.
$2,000 limit on a credit card can get you your first month's car payment and a nice wardrobe. But if he's actually marriage ready, he's been working at it since he was 7, 8, 9 years old. right? So my 19-year-old has a business now and he saves he budgets himself, he saves, he's starting to think about buying a house, paying it off before he gets married. So the mindset of a provider is very different. He's coming
Mm.
at it with assets, with something he can provide. That's gonna look different. You're coming with your character, with your femininity, with your ability to, share your mamta energy, with your ability to pair bond and like emotionally keep everything intact. So I say he brings the money, you bring the honey. And I'm doing this to help women get out of this 50-50 relationship thing because what they're
Yeah.
doing is they're meeting neither here nor there men or predatory men and then paying for themselves to be in that relationship and then sleeping with them and then years later the guy hasn't proposed, he hasn't married and your biological clock is ticking. I can't tell you how many Zoom calls I've sat on with women crying their eyes out because they're trying to freeze their eggs at 39 and they realize it's too late, and or women in their mid 40s realizing they wasted all their time and they might not have. So I'm like, flip, you have a different timeline than a man's, and there's a certain things you need to be looking for. So a man that's asking for, like my husband verified my family background, right? Like he needs to see who my dad is, who my sister is, who my brother is, like, but he's not going to be looking at my bank statements because that's not what I'm bringing to the table. So that's why it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. Basically, both sexes, they look for different things. They have different needs. You know, a man doesn't need a woman that's a provider. He already brings that to the table. He needs somebody else that brings, like you said, the honey. They bring a different type of energy. I like what you said about your son. He reminds me of myself. I actually purchased my first property. I'm looking to pay it off, just like what he said. And yeah, just as you were talking, I was just thinking back to myself when I was his age, planning out things, and I'm doing a lot of things I said I was going to do. I want to know, what advice do you give your son? Because I honestly think it's harder, and I could be wrong. I think it's hard for young men to find a quality woman in today's day and age, especially when he's that young, because it's like it's just sex is everywhere. It's all on TikTok. I'm sure your son knows about it. He sees it. What do you tell him to watch out for?
So in my culture, there's criteria that a man is given, and before that, you don't consider getting married. That's why he's so focused on his criteria. Okay, I gotta have a house, I gotta have this, I gotta have this,
Yeah.
because we have to take the proposal for him, and the guy's family will refuse to take the proposal if he's not ready because he's not marriage ready yet. And so he already knows that he has to have certain things in order before we're even going to take the proposal. And without us taking the proposal, there's no wedding. So he's already been raised, he's very much against the hypersexualized American culture
Yeah.
and he doesn't subscribe to that at all. But again, it's the family culture growing up. He understands it from a scientific perspective. He understands it from a spiritual perspective. And I told him at the end of the day, like I will respect, he's a grown man. He can make his own decisions and he's allowed to make his mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, but when I already see that, he follows a lot of like healthy like level up men's channels and things like that too. And he's like, no mom, I'm already seeing the consequences of men being addicted to video games and men. My son used to play video games up until 17 and then he quit. He's like, no, I need those 2 hours a day to build my business, to work out, to do this. So I think whatever the culture of your home is and whatever you prioritize, that becomes your children's standard. But if you're not having these conversations at home, if this isn't it's not like a part of your family culture, then your children will have to lean on learning from their friends, and their friends don't know.
Yeah.
Like you
Exactly.
don't
Like
know where are
I
they getting their information from, you know?
said. Yeah. Um, I'm wondering. I know that you said your son, he's free to make his own decisions, and then if he makes his mistakes, he'll learn from them. Are you guys pushing him to date somebody that's traditional Pakistani that's in Pakistan, or do you not even touch that? Because I would think that I would think that if he does start looking for a woman when he's in his mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and he doesn't have dating or relationship experience, he could be just like women can be taken advantage of by predators when they're high achieving. The same thing can happen to men. There's women who are hunting for certain things, and they could take advantage of your son. So, what do you guys push any kind of like cultural? Do you prefer him to be with a traditional Pakistani woman or American woman? Like, where are you pushing directing him?
So he himself is very traditional, and he doesn't funny thing is, he doesn't even find Pakistani women as traditional anymore. Like, his criteria is so high. Can I speak to something else a little bit? Yeah, he was
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
Romania recently, and he's like, "Mom, Romanian women are even more traditional and more feminine than Pakistani women." I'm like, "I am offended by that." But he's like, "No, Mom, they are. They're even more." So I'm like,
Yeah.
so his standards are even higher. The thing that I want to say, that I want to touch on, and we could do a whole talk just about this. My husband and I don't understand this. This is so much a part of the narrative, and you just said it. So there is this huge belief system in the West that you need relationship experience to be successful in relationships. That
I
is a
hear you.
lie. It's a myth. It is not true. In fact, the more relationship experience you have, the least likely you are to be successful. So in my culture, you have no romantic relationship experience, no sexual experience when you're going into a marriage. You have relationship experience by relating to your mom, your dad, your aunts and uncles, your cousins, your grandma, your grandpa, your neighbors, your neighbors' kids. Like, there is a very tribal looking out for each other, relationship bonding. You understand relationships, but having experience in romantic relationship is not a good thing. That's actually quite a bit of a negative thing. In fact, there's new data emerging of this that they're actually afraid to release here, that I'll speak to just a little bit. I might get in trouble
All
because
right.
they're afraid to actually release this information.
Mm-hmm.
So they're now finding, and they accidentally found us through other studies, that when the more relationship experience that especially a woman has, the harder time she has pair bonding with a new partner.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this was found in her brain. Like, it's a brain thing. Her standard for what she now requires for her body and nervous system to allow her to pair bond gets totally screwed up. It's such a it's very controversial, so they're afraid to actually even release this because they know what's going to happen. It's like, you told us to sleep around, and now you're saying that we're
Okay.
destroyed because of
I
that.
was I was just about to say that. Do they distinguish between somebody that's dating and somebody having sex? 'Cause I do believe that the more sex partners you have, whether you're a man or woman, that does impact you negatively when it comes to actually finding a partner. But I get the point that you're saying, because you guys have history, you have a culture that basically proves that point. I think that it depends on how you date. Like, I think that if you're intentional about your dating and you're serious about it, I think after dating a few people, you can tell that you have a good idea what's out there, what's not out there. Like, like for me, for example, I know I was a college athlete. Thought I was the shit. I thought I had a lot of options, and I was like, oh, I need to be with this type of woman. It had nothing to do with her character. I had to do with, like, I thought I had to be with some supermodel. Then I had that experience, and it just wasn't fulfilling for me. And what I realized is that after dating and trying to find a superficial type of person, is like, there aren't that what I wanted doesn't really exist, pretty basically. And that because I was intentionally dating and trying to find a wife, I realized, like, what a quality partner actually looked like. I think that probably that's the thing that hurts American culture compared to Pakistani culture, because we don't have those elders helping us. We really don't have an idea of what a good partner or a good relationship would look like until we have that kind of experience.
So
So
we learned that from our parents. So, for example, my son says all the time that you guys are my models of what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. And my models of what a healthy relationship was supposed to look like were all my aunts, all my cousins, all my, Pakistani friends, my Indian friends, my Middle Eastern friends. So that actually burning your hand isn't the only way of learning. I think
yeah.
you can watch someone else burn their hand, be like, okay, don't put my hand over there. So if you're surrounded by healthy people, in a healthy society, then you don't have to date a lot of people. And I hate the word dating now, right? Because dating means, going home to someone's house and Netflix and chill from meeting them on an app. Courting was he brought his
Yeah,
parents to your house, right?
yeah,
That's traditionally, or you went to dinner with him in a public place where, you weren't doing things in private. So I nowadays, yes, where we have no healthy role models, and we're not putting ourselves in those rooms. People don't go to church anymore. They don't have healthy married friends. They don't have connection with their aunts and
yeah.
uncles. So if you had a lot of healthy models, you would know, oh my God, I love how my uncle treats my aunt. And oh, okay, when your husband says this, this is how you talk back to him. This is how you respect your children. Like you just learned that. These are not things that we had to learn from experience. We learned this from our family units, from our tribe.
No, I agree. I've read something similar to that within a book. It said that basically a lot of people who grew up in healthy households, they don't have a problem choosing finding a healthy partner, and it's completely true. What I'm wondering now, I wonder. You said that you mentioned this a lot on your channel as well. You say that you're really against boyfriends slash girlfriends. Like, what do you hate about that?
Everything. It's not a religious status. It's not a legal status. It's not a spiritual status. There is no evolutionary history of boyfriend and girlfriends existing. And what it does is it starts the pair bonding process without the safety and sacredness of marriage. So if you are spending time with someone alone, you're giving this person a title. They're supposed to be your person, but not really. I can break up with you anytime. I can leave you. I'm not really responsible for you. We're not a unit yet. So it's like it's what it creates, the dynamic it creates for women, and I'll give you the male part too, is it's like if your mom hadn't decided, if you when you were born, if your mom hadn't decided if she was going to keep you or not. It's the closest example of that to our nervous systems and our evolutionary history. Because when we came in, we had a certain level of safety and certainty through our mother's attunement to our needs. And then our mom, had our dad containing her and providing for her so she could be relaxed and be with us. But if our mom every day was like half in, half out, and sometimes she'd be really loving, but then she was also unsure. Every time, you were fussy or anything, it would be like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't have to deal with this, right? You're not my husband. You're not my wife. That it's like this really weird kind of disruptive process in the psyche where you don't know where you stand, because in our evolutionary history, Homo sapiens have been monogamous for 3.5 million years. And this, what's fascinating about this to me is that if you study the of the cultures that we've studied, up to 85% of them allowed polygamous relationships. And yet, no one did them. Very few people did. I come from Pakistan, Pakistan is it's an Islamic state, and in
Yeah.
Islam, polygamy is allowed. And yet,
Yes.
in my 43 years of existence on this planet, I've only heard of one family. In a country where it is legally allowed, how come only one person's doing it? This fascinated me that
Isn't
85% of
it?
cultures allowed it, but no one
Is
does it.
is that associated with wealth? The reason I ask that is because I have a lot of Middle Eastern friends, and I've been to Qatar, and I do know how traditional it is. And from what my friend has told me, yes, people can marry multiple women, but typically it has to do with your income. If you can't afford to have multiple wives, then you don't. I guess you're not allowed to have multiple wives. But does it work something similarly in Pakistan?
You have to be able to provide for them equally, and your
Right.
first wife has to give you permission. But even if you you know adjust for that, there's a lot of wealth in Pakistan. It's just distributed, the way it's distributed everywhere, that they
Yeah.
don't do it. They don't do it. Even I know situations where the man should have done it, and he was being encouraged to do it, and he didn't do it. And the reason for this is because we pair bond. If you even remove Islam from it and look at those 85% of other societies where they allowed it, how come only few people did it? Because Homo sapiens pair bond.
They
We
respect the
like
partner.
we want to just be with one person. Now there is a cheater's gene in our history. You know, there is it's actually been identified. There is a cheater's gene
Yeah.
that it's guessed
Okay.
that maybe half of the people have. So there are a few percentage of people that cheat and they're wired to do so. And of course they can choose not to, but they do it. But mostly we're monogamous and we enjoy that. So what happens in boyfriend girlfriend situations is we start pair bonding sort of, but the safety is not there. So it's like a broken process. And then for the men, it's really dangerous because in all of our evolutionary history, men have never had this type of open access to women. They've had to
Hmm.
prove themselves. They've had to become somebody. They've had to show their character, their strength, their providing, protecting in order to win a mate, in order to earn the right to be a father and a husband and all of these things, right? Earn the man card, as one would call it. And now we have these men that have not earned that within themselves, going and sleeping with multiple women, having multiple girlfriends, or even if it's a good guy, it's gonna switch his conserve energy switch on, which men have more of than women do. And he's gonna say, well, if I can get it with the least amount of effort for just looking cute, well, then I don't have to get my college degree. I don't have to work hard. I don't have to, do all
Yeah.
these other things, right? So it's dangerous for society, for people to be in these full relationships, for men and women and children.
I agree. I want to talk about monogamy a little bit because you said that, like we're talking about tradition, and I heard, I think it was Esther Perel. We talked. She mentioned monogamy, and historically, monogamy, from what she has said, I haven't done my own research. Said monogamy was you were with one person for the rest of your life. Didn't necessarily mean that you had sex with one person for the rest of your life. So, do you think? I want to know. Do you think it's normal for humans to be, I guess, to have sex with just one person for the rest of their life?
I believe it is. And this is what I've
Mhm.
seen. Like, this is the norm in my culture. Obviously, there's bad people in every culture. There are people that
Yeah.
cheat, there's people that do all kinds of things. But I see people thriving and not wanting to, even men in my culture that have the status. Like when you talk about the right to like marry multiple partners being wealth, it's not wealth, it's being able to provide equally. Provide means housing, food, and clothing. Like, we're not talking about Chanel and like Mercedes, right? Like
Yeah.
now on social media, it's been blown out of proportion, but providing is this basic evolutionary survival needs, right? Most like men that can do it, they just don't. They don't. They prefer to be with one pair bonded partner. I think right now, if you look at if there's a person that's never been outside of the West, this is all they know, and they see this hypersexualization of society on social media and in everywhere around them. I know they can't wrap their heads around this. But people in healthy, committed relationships have no desire to step outside of that. Like it doesn't make sense. It almost invokes a disgust response. Like there's absolutely no need for it. My husband and I were having a conversation about this years ago, and he said that this is what separates you from an animal. He's like, animals just go and they have urges and they just go meet their urges and they do whatever they want. But we're part animal, but we're not all animal. We're also part divine, right? We're created in the image of God, and we have consciousness and we have awareness, and we can separate our animalistic urges from our heart and our emotions and our consciousness. So right now, what's happening is not normal for us. We're behaving like animals.
What I will say is this, is that a man that is focused, that has purpose and is driven is way less likely to cheat on you, to sleep around than the guy that doesn't have anything going on. Most of the guys that I grew up with, friends that I've had from college, the guys that really aren't doing anything in life, all of them were like fixated on chasing women. And they're still like that to this day. So any women listening, that's a good tip on how you can vet a guy. I want to know. I have a few female friends that have fell into this pattern. They'll be in college, they'll meet one guy, and they'll put all their energy into this guy, and then after 5 years they're still dating, they're still in the girlfriend phase, and that guy still hasn't married them. And most like, and some, unfortunately, a lot of times those guys end up leaving them down the road, but occasionally a guy will propose 8 years down the road because he couldn't find anybody else. But I want to know, how long should a woman stay in a relationship before moving on? Like how should a woman date?
So I teach rotational dating, which is I've taken the Eastern concept of the way it's done in my culture with like the proposal system, the way it would have been done in our Homo sapien history, and then modernized it because obviously these days we want to go out to dinner with the guy, right? Like we don't want our uncle coming out with us on the date or whatever. So,
Yeah.
so with rotational dating, what you do is when you're ready for marriage, which I recommend women get married in their 20s, okay? You can have your career in your 90s, right? Like you can build a business when you're 80. You can get a
Yeah.
degree when you're 55, but you can't do certain things at that age that you want to do earlier. So I recommend you start getting, prepared for marriage in your 20s. But I also have clients getting married in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. So start wherever you are. But what you do is you let everyone that you've ever met, your happily married friends, your uncles, your aunts, your pastor, everyone in your church family, everywhere that you go, there's healthy family people, or like people around at work, and you say, I am ready for marriage, and I'm looking for someone, that's godly, that's, has this, and this, and I would be open to you setting me up. And I believe that we need to get off the damn apps and go back to the tribal ways just because the algorithm of the apps has changed too recently. Like met my husband online on a matrimonial site actually, but that
Hmm.
was 15 years ago, and my mom and my cousins, like they were introducing people, and then I also created that profile. But in 15 years things have changed really rapidly, and we have these really
Yes.
sophisticated AI and situations now. So go the old-fashioned way. That way, you also don't have to work as hard as vetting someone because whoever's introducing you is taking half the responsibility. Like, they're not going to introduce you to someone that they at least partly don't know, right? It's their reputation on the line. And now already you have this built-in vetting process. And then what you do is you date 3 or 4 men. And when I say date, let me clarify, you are never to go to his house. He's never coming to your house. You're not laying down. You're not even going to a movie theater. You are meeting for coffees, ice creams, lunch, dinner. You're seeing him in situations where you can have a conversation to find out his values and how close he is to his family, how he's been preparing for marriage, and you can, show your values. And you do this until one guy on your rotation proposes to you. So I teach women to have the no girlfriend talk. If they want to become, you let them know, I'm sorry, I'm dating for marriage. I don't know what I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what girlfriend means. Could you explain that to me a little bit more? Like, it's not a legal status, it's not anything, right? So you keep dating multiple men, and until one proposes, and when you accept the proposal, he has to go to your, if you are okay with it, he goes to your dad or your brother or your uncle, and then the vetting process starts. And then you put tape on your mouth and you shut up because men are better at vetting men, and you let your dad do his thing, or the pastor or whoever you're appointing, and let them go through that process. And then if that works, then you say yes, and then you get married, and then you have sex when you're married. Like the way it was supposed to be, and then you pair bond with just this one person because you haven't messed up your brain with pair bonding these faux ways with all these random people that don't care about you.
You shocked me when you said the movie thing. I love movies. That was something I used to do with my mom growing up. We just like going to the drive-in movies. But I understand why you say that. You can't get to know somebody
You
watch
can't.
a
And
movie.
it's dark, and he doesn't like, you don't want to be anywhere where there's groping, touching,
I
like
see.
these are not, you shouldn't be exchanging energy that starts the pair bonding process because that person hasn't earned that yet, and he will respect you more for that too. I feel like healthy men don't want to jump into bed with you. Like they want to wait. So I think a lot of women are used to dating those type of men, and so they think that every man wants that, but they don't.
You said that a woman should rotate guys. What if the guy that she doesn't? Because usually when you're dating multiple people, there's gonna be somebody you like more than the other person. But what if the guy that proposes isn't like that's her last option? That was like he was the last on the list. Should she still choose that guy?
Yes, because chances are, if you have trauma in your past or you are bad at choosing relationships or based on chemistry, the one that you were most chemically attracted to was probably not the best one anyways. For women, the interesting thing is that men know right away. My husband proposed in 2 weeks. We were married in 2 months. He said he knew the first day. Like when they're grown, they know what they want, they know their values, they see their values, they're like, this is it, right? They don't take a long time. If you want to allow them to do certain things, they'll keep doing it. Like they'll conserve energy, but they know, right? For women, trust is a longer process for us. It takes a lot for us to shut off our worry gland, our on guard gland with a man. So especially if he's a healthy man and he's not like chemically kind of distorting our emotions and our rational thinking skills, it's going to take time, right?
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of clients, they're like, but I just don't like him. And then that's the one that they're happily married to and having kids with and fully provided for and living their best life. And because it's like by the eighth date, they're like, oh my God, I've never been treated this way. And he's treating me so kindly. And we have these amazing discussions. I'm like, yes, because you never let it get that far. Because the good guys, healthy men, don't typically have the best communication skills. Like men are not supposed to, right? Like we know scientifically, women use 20,000 more words than men do. We speak earlier, we mature early emotionally. Men are not supposed to be great at communicators. They learn this over time. So to me, the biggest red flag is a guy saying all the right things and coming at you knowing exactly what to say. Like that's shady because like who have you been practicing on? So the nice guy, it takes time. It takes time with the healthy guy, especially if you're not used to healthy men being around you.
Gotcha. Well, we're going a little bit over, but I want to ask you two more questions. The last one, you have a book called Lady Balls. Cracked up when I heard that title. Could you talk a little bit about your book? What's the
Yes,
yeah.
it's copied up on 11/11/2003. I'm sorry, 2023. I keep saying 2003. Lady balls, ovaries. So I talk about in the back of the book, in the back cover, I talk about how women these days, we've been taught to represent ourselves using male narratives, right? So like men wear their power on the outside, right? It shows up in their physical body on
Mhm.
the outside. Well, the female balls, the feminine balls are ovaries. They're hidden. They're so hidden that I had to explain to some of the people freaking out over my book's title that women do have lady balls. They're called ovaries. They didn't know. So I'm like, our power is so mysterious and so hidden that we have forgotten it. So in this book, I talk about that innate, quiet, more knowing, more mysterious, feminine power. And I also talk about how good, kind-hearted, healthy people need to be dangerous. They need to be savage to predators. That what's happening is there's a lot of predatory people right now making the headlines, like taking positions because they haven't evolved out of that dark energy. And then there's all these other kind-hearted people that are like turn the other cheek and, people pleasing and appeasing each other. And we know from studying predators that they target weak family units. So when convicted serial killers and rapists were asked, how did you choose your victim? All of them said weak family unit. They can smell trauma, the lack of a father, the lack of a family structure and containment on you. I'm a victim of childhood sexual abuse, so this is especially important to me because I go back and I'm like, oh my God, if my dad wasn't emasculated and, being an immigrant, whatever he went through, like, I'm not blaming them. I know they had a very hard life,
Mhm, mhm.
but I wouldn't have been a target if my family was presenting itself as a stronger family unit. So one of the things I'm really committed to doing is restoring, first of all, feminine power so we can choose wisely, right? Because a good mother starts before she chooses her partner. You don't become a good mother after you have kids. You become a good mother with the man that you decide is going to be your husband, right? The man you're going to lay down with. And these days, we're just, like I cannot even, coming from my culture, conceive of a person. Like in my 43 years, I've never heard of a Pakistani woman having a child out of wedlock. Never. Maybe it's happened somewhere once. I don't know. I've never heard of it in 43 years. Yet
Mhm.
in the US, most of the people I know here have kids out of wedlock, right? So what you're doing is you're already setting your child up to be a target. You're already putting a sign on their forehead that makes them super attractive to predators. So restoring that feminine power to choose wisely, and then allowing men to be men in our household, letting dads be dads, and then letting our field that we create in our family unit be so strong that predators not only choose to skip our home, they choose to skip our neighbor's home because we are all looking out for each other. And my biggest message with this book is that we need healthy people to step into their power, to choose wisely, make better decisions, and then take care of each other and preserve that family unit.
Mina, last question. I always ask my guests this at the end. What is your philosophy for life?
I would say human connection. That's the biggest sign that you are healthy. And that's the one thing that took me the most inner work to do because I had lost that through my trauma. So I would say if you have the ability to pair bond with at least two or three people in your life, whether it's your mother, your husband, and a friend, you're healthy. Like use that as a gauge. And if you have no one that you're ever pair bonded with, then that's a sign that there's inner work to do. And go and do that inner work because life is more colorful when you have people on your team that are looking out for you and that you're looking out for. And I think that's what we're here to do. That's what we're wired to do. That's what makes us spiritually happy. So I would say human connection is my philosophy.
Mina, thank you for being the guest on the show. This was a great interview. It went by, honestly, time went by fast, and I learned a lot about the dynamics between American and Pakistani culture. Thank you for being the guest on the show. And any last words?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated this conversation. And you're right, it did go by really fast. I would actually love to have you on my channel as well whenever you're ready.
Definitely. Just let me know. We can make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.